Today's video is the continuation of a topic I've been working on for quite a long time, and that topic is disinformation. Actually, beyond that, the words disinformation or misinformation have now become politically charged and fail to communicate the proper scope of the matter, but regardless. Beyond that, I want to discuss what seems to be the dawning new online age, if you will, of deception. The age of deception for a lot of people carries a biblical context. I don't mean to convey that same connotation here, but I also don't mean to dispute it. The all-encompassing phrase age of deception, for me, simply refers to the true scope of the problem and showcases just how far the issue is about to spread. In the past, I warned about something that I've now come to refer to as the deepfake inflection point. Briefly explaining that term, the inflection point of a curve is the exact moment when the angle changes from concave to convex, but the similarity I see now is that the deepfake inflection point will be the precise moment when images, faces, or even videos online can no longer be trusted by the naked human eye, and that inflection point is very close at hand. For thousands of years of human evolution, sight was the ultimate determining factor. Sure, there were disinformation campaigns on a certain scale, such as the use of inflatable tanks in World War II, creating a show of force that didn't really exist with devastating impact. Yes, images and visual proof can and have been faked, forged, or manufactured in the past in selective situations, but never before has the capability to realistically fabricate images, video, and audio been a widespread commercial norm. Today, however, the ability to create realistic but fabricated imagery with the click of a mouse is quite normal. See, every advancing consecutive moment, the AI that you currently are able to use is likely the worst version of AI that you will ever use from here forward. How? Because every advancing consecutive moment, AI gets better. Audio, visual, generative, etc. All of it is building upon itself. Now, that's useful for artists and photographers and especially YouTube thumbnails, but how does it contribute to the age of deception? This is how. To be clear, YouTube community guidelines exist in such a way where I will be censoring the entirety of what was said and what was shown for shocking imagery. But this right here is a post from Ben Shapiro about atrocities committed recently in Israel. I make no comment on Shapiro as a person or his politics. I use this example for obvious reasons having to do with relative reach, scope, and the implications of AI. The image itself was seen some 16 million times, but it led to a quintessential exchange demonstrating the problems we are about to face at scale. In response to this post, a verified profile named Jackson Hinkle, claiming in his bio at least to be exposing propagandists, stated that the image was created using generative AI. He said this as the result of using an AI detection tool called AI or Not, operated by a company called Optic, and this led to a further exchange where the two internet personalities called each other liars, with tens of millions of eyes watching. Here's the part where things go off the rails. The new fact-checking initiative on Twitter, called Community Notes, came into play when it cited GAN detection and tagged Ben Shapiro's image as generative AI. But it didn't stop there. After bragging about this publicly, with millions of views yet again, Jackson Hinkle received yet another fact-check of his own, which disputed the accuracy of GAN detection methods, reversing the claim, and stating that the methods used were inaccurate. In addition, the original community note was removed from the viral post by Ben Shapiro, making the entire chain of events a multi-stage process where people were fed false information on both sides of the spectrum. In tandem, as all of this transpired in real time, again digested and propagated by millions of people, an internet troll on an infamous message board posted this image, claiming that this was the real base of the AI forgery originally posted by Shapiro, which was not a forgery. Just one problem. The image of the puppy was itself an AI fabrication, generated with just a couple clicks of his mouse, and not even really a good fabrication at that. I hope everyone can begin to see the problem here. An image of wartime atrocities got posted on social media. The authenticity of that image was disputed, citing AI fabrication. The image was then fact-checked as fake by the platform's authority system, Community Notes, after a viral accusation from a political rival. After that dispute, people chime in with more fabricated imagery as if it were the original, and then the authority reverses itself, claiming that the image is actually real and undermining the dispute. What we see in no uncertain terms here is the concept of AI infiltrating and degrading the ability for people online to trust what they see with their own eyes, as political rivals use that concept to undermine each other. All the while, social media verification systems become a casualty of that deception by swapping back and forth, uselessly contributing to the overall chaos. We are at, or at the very least reaching, the deepfake inflection point. So, obviously, I talk a lot recently about failure of trust and media credibility. What you see on social media is often fabricated for views deliberately, and what you read in headlines can be ideologically biased. What can be done? Well, one thing I personally use for research is called Ground News. Ground News is an independent app and website that combines news from around the world in one place so you get the full story. It took me like 6 months continuously to vet them as a sponsor, and having done that, especially seeing the state of the modern world and media frenzy that geopolitics has now created, I'm happy I did. There's been a tremendous amount of coverage and dispute regarding an explosion at the Al Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza. Media outlets have been rushing to report first, publishing headlines that were later altered and generally contributing to the fog of war in a way that's getting very difficult to parse. As you clearly saw from the New York Times, along with many other news outlets, their goal is to prioritize speed and profit over responsible journalism. So, how do we navigate these sensationalized headlines to uncover the actual truth? On their homepage, Ground News presents a timeline of most recent events happening around the conflict, illustrating how media coverage varies depending on source bias. Let's use the first example of the event to take a deeper look into how various sources are framing it. There's over 300 articles covering this one event, with the bias distribution showing that 43% of the coverage comes from the center. These ratings are based on ongoing assessments from 3 different news monitoring organizations. I checked those out too. And parsing those 300 plus sources is overwhelming, so that's where the comparison tool comes in. The left emphasizes high death toll caused by Israel, while the right contrasts the responsibility for deaths with Hamas militants. If I want to analyze the different headlines and cross-check their factuality, political affiliation, and ownership bias, I can also easily do that. For instance, The Journal, on the left, has mixed factuality, stating it was an Israeli airstrike. In contrast, BBC News, tagged with high factuality and owned by the government, provides a seemingly much more objective view here without assigning blame. Whereas the Epoch Times, with low factuality leaning right, accuses the Palestinian terror group. Same story, 3 entirely different ways of presenting that information, especially in the title, which then skews perception for readers. Ground News has become, and that's why I'm excited to have them on as a continuing sponsor of this channel. They are independent. It's important you to check it out. Echelon, with the link down below to get 30% off unlimited access. Again, ground.news/echelon for 30% off unlimited access. Sticking with that very same example, it actually perfectly demonstrates the problem this entire video. The issue of trust extends to almost every corner of modern online information. In the immediate aftermath of that very same attack we just discussed, with wildly differing politicized headlines that changed over time, the Israeli ambassador to the United States and the official government profile shared a set of videos purportedly showing footage of the event itself. Just one problem: channels subsequently deleted those videos, editing them out of the posts because they have been accurate based on basic claims for the event, and Hanyana Naftali is on record himself claiming that the Prime Minister called him up to work on a digital warfare task force. That initial claim was later deleted rather quickly, meaning that the entire narrative surrounding this particular explosion radically changed multiple times over the span of hours, completely reversing when compared to initial reports, subsequently leading to mass confusion. We are witnessing wartime propaganda on a scale that few in our lifetime have ever seen, in an environment where the tools to exacerbate the underlying problem of distrust are only getting better. See, the problem of contradicting information is omnipresent at all levels of authority. The White House even had to walk back claims made by the President of the United States about what he did or did not see with his own eyes. And while that kind of error, if you want to call it that, is not a novel occurrence, it further undermines public trust. Up till now, I've focused predominantly on the conflict in Israel, but the age of deception will touch every facet of our lives. To explain this, however, I have to pivot here and talk about shazupan. Shazupan, for those that don't know, is a term that means the pig butchering and primarily references organized, probably more so industrialized, romance cons. I have an entire video dedicated to this subject alone, which I'll link down below in the description, one where I actually take action against a few of them. But the basic summary is that there is an entire corporate structure, mostly saturated in Asia, but bleeding over to the West more and more. There is an entire corporate structure dedicated to the process of romantic approach and then bleeding the target dry financially. They use shell companies, crypto exchanges, and fake smartphone applications with detailed scripts and psychological techniques being taught at scale to all of their workers. They have customized profiles, standard approach methods, and the problem even goes so far as to use legitimate pictures and information from actual dating website users and profiles. obtained via data sharing agreements and then sold through darknet data brokers. Again, I looked at all this far more in depth in its own video. How does it tie back in? This is how. See, up till now, the bottleneck has been visual verification. These organized crime syndicates would do custom photo shoots with real girls at legitimate locations worldwide if need be, using every tool at their disposal to increase the efficacy of their deception. But they had to write entire scripts aimed at avoiding the idea of video chats. Now, that's about to change. It hasn't changed yet, per se, but it will. Originally posted by Hirokazu Yokohara, a notable 3D artist, we can now see the crossover between generative imaging AI and future video applications. The footage eerily shows him with a towel on his head rapidly being converted to a female digital avatar. The frame rate is obviously quite slow as a result of the generative process and relative computing power, plus the images contain a lot of imperfections and inconsistencies, but in the span of 1 year, generative AI has gone from cartoonish memes with deformed faces and horribly disproportionate features to faces that are indistinguishable from reality. Not only that, but according to joint research from Lancaster University and UC Berkeley, generative adversarial networks, GAN, are able to produce human faces that are not just indistinguishable from reality for the average user, but are also, on average, more trustworthy to them as well. That is a terrifying prospect when we are, right now, closing in on the ability for someone to modify themselves however they choose through AI in real time. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The deepfake inflection point for static images has already passed. The ensuing chaos of its entire premise is being played out on social media right in front of our eyes. But the deepfake inflection point for video is now fast approaching. However, the problem isn't born from any one individual thing. It's more so a product of environment. Media trust, institutional trust, and trust of authority in government is hitting an all-time low in the face of overwhelming political bias, while social media platforms, such as Twitter, become a monetized feeding frenzy of misinformation. At the exact same time, the ability for bad actors to create, propagate, and perfect falsified content is exponentially increasing, even so far as to where that synthetic content is sometimes viewed as more trustworthy by unsuspecting viewers. The bridge between static imagery and video conversion is being pushed forward every single day. When you think of the applications for this technology, sure, the first impulse might be more filters on my Snapchat videos, but the horrifying reality is that we are crossing into a digital age where you quite literally cannot trust anything you see or hear online. I didn't even delve into the concept of audio AI here and its massively advancing ability to create realistic human voices or clone existing audio profiles. But the sum total of where we stand is decreasing trust as a result of increasingly accurate forgery tools. Yes, there exists a possibility that AI itself can be used to combat deceptive AI, or a possibility that media coverage will pull back from the concept of speed over accuracy, yet another growing concern with the rise of monetized social media reporting. But that kind of trade-off is uncertain at best. Our lives are increasingly devoted to consuming information online at a time when trust is decreasing more rapidly than ever before, while the ability to falsify imagery, audio, and soon video is becoming commercialized into everyone's pocket smartphone. At the same exact time, younger generations are witnessing a dampening effect on their average attention span, while consumption of media strays further and further towards reading headlines alone. In combination, all of these factors make it easier than it has ever been to deceive, while the industries benefiting from that deception are more profitable than ever. In conclusion, we are in the beginning stages of what I can only refer to as the age of deception, witnessing firsthand the various moments in time where the shift occurs from being able to trust what you see with your own eyes and what seems real to you, and being unable to trust anything because no matter how realistic it may look in any interpretation by yourself as an individual, without some form of authority to tell you it actually is real, you simply won't know. Will that authority be a competing big tech company with its own proprietary AI verification tool? Maybe, probably. Plenty of them out there trying for that very purpose. Will it be the government? Possibly. They'd certainly love for that to be the case. But our ability as an individual person to see, discern reality based on what's right there in front of us and believe is a dying creature.
Today I'm going to speak about Guy Debord and his theory of the society of the spectacle. At the end of the video, I'll briefly also address the question posed by a viewer, how that theory is different from my own theory of prophelicity. Debord was a writer, an artist, an activist, a Marxist, a cultural theorist. He was an intellectual all-rounder, a public intellectual star in the 1960s and 70s. The Society of the Spectacle was published in 1967, and it's a modern classic of media theory. Although it's actually broader than media theory and some sort of quite comprehensive social theory. There's also a film titled The Society of the Spectacle. It's from 1974 that was made by Debord. The film follows the book in large parts and shows various kinds of images from movies and photographs. Actually, I found it quite difficult to watch. I don't think it aged well, not as good as McLuhan's The Medium is the Massage. This video will have 5 parts. First, I will address the question briefly, what is the Society of the Spectacle? Then I will discuss 3 theoretical components of the theory: semiotics, political economy, and ontology. Then I'll talk about the loss of authenticity, then about Debord's call for revolution, and finally, as said, briefly about the difference between the spectacle and prophylicity. So first, what is the Society of the Spectacle? It's a book that presents a general social theory which critiques 20th century society as a hyper-capitalist society, where production and commerce of material goods has evolved into the production, the commerce, the commodification, the consumption of images. Now, images are the most important commodity around which the whole economy and all of social life revolves. The concept spectacle comes from the Latin verb spicere, to look at. So it means showing something, presenting something that is to be looked at. In a very literal sense, a spectacle is a show business. It's an economic or socio-political framework which is based on showing, on staging, on making something seen. And not just in the sense of a cultural industry as described by Adorno and Horkheimer, in the sense of the mass media, but broader. For instance, with the emergence of brands, all goods have a certain show element to them that is more important than the mere commodity itself. What is marketed is primarily the image of the thing. Think, for instance, of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, too, is a spectacle. Now, here are some core quotes. The whole life presents itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. And the spectacle is capital accumulated to the point where it becomes image. These are 2 general claims. First, all life is presentation of images that are produced to be seen. Life is a show. And second, this show is for profit. It's a business. Debord writes that the spectacle is a social relationship between people that is mediated by images. So the spectacle, as a notion of life as show business, is a socio-political and not an aesthetic, or not even in a strict sense a media theory concept. Spectacle defines society as a whole, and not just mass media. However, mass media are the prime manifestation of the spectacle. Debord says that mass media are the most stultifying, superficial manifestation of the spectacle. And he calls news or propaganda, advertising and entertainment the specific manifestations of the spectacle as well. The whole theory consists of 3 main theoretical components, or rests on 3 theoretical pillars. A, it is a semiotics. It's a theory of images or representations. B, it's a political economy. It's a theory of a mode of production of social life and of power. And C, it's an ontology. It's a theory of what is real and what is not. Semiotically, Debord's theory is remotely influenced by Walter Benjamin. Benjamin already spoke about the loss of the aura of art in the realm of technological reproduction, where there are only copies, like movies or photographs, but no originals. More directly, Debord is influenced by French post-structuralist thinkers of the 1960s like Roland Barthes and Jacques Derrida. These thinkers talk and signifiers that construct meaning not as representation of something real or of real objects, but in relation or difference to other signs. In order to understand the meaning of signs or images or language, you have to understand the discourse, the game within which they construct sense, and not the things they may somehow refer to. Here are some core quotes again. The epigraph of chapter 1 is taken from the 19th century philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach and his book The Essence of Christianity. Here Feuerbach speaks of the present age which prefers the sign to the thing signified, the copy to the original, representation to reality. So this quote is about decoupling the sign from the thing signified. And that's also indicated in the title of the first chapter, Separation Perfected. The spectacle perfects the separation between the sign and the thing signified. In this way, representations, signs, images, become independent from any original. Debord says, wherever representation takes on an independent existence, the spectacle reestablishes its rule. Now, importantly, the images are now superior. They're more important, more powerful, more valuable than what they represent. Think again of a brand where the image Coca-Cola is more powerful than the drink itself. So Debord says the perceptible world is replaced by a set of images that are superior to that world, yet at the same time impose themselves as eminently perceptible. You perceive the brand as much as you perceive the drink, or more than that. The theory of the spectacle is also the theory of a political economy. Debord is a Marxist, and for him the economy is the base structure of society. So the theory of the spectacle is also about political power and about a mode of production on which this power rests. The mode of production in the society of the spectacle has shifted from merely producing real goods, whatever, coal, clothes, drinks, to producing images. We now have a culture industry in the mass media. We have branding. We have events like sports or entertainment. And these are the real products. All life is now such a show business. If you buy a car, if you have a house, or if you travel, it becomes a form of show business. You not just move around or live or eat, but you move, live, or eat as part of a larger show business. A good example is tourism. Traveling as tourism is somehow staging your life as a show. Tourist destinations are marketed in this way. Tourism is human movement as show business, as spectacle. Again, some quotes. The spectacle has its roots in the economy, and it must, in the end, come to dominate the spectacular market. Or the spectacle expresses the total practice of one particular economic and social formation. It is that formation's agenda. In show business, the show is business. The spectacle is first and foremost an economic mode of production based on show. It dominates now the market. Economic value is spectacular value. This very much echoes Walter Benjamin's notion of exhibition value. Even though Debord wrote in the 1960s, the theory also has some hints at what Niklas Luhmann later calls social autopoiesis. Debord says the spectacle is simply the economic realm developing for itself, and the spectacle is self-generated, and it makes up its own rules. It is hierarchical power evolving on its own. Described in this way, the spectacle is self-reproducing and self-perpetuating. It's a system that constructs itself and that is not steered or governed by law, politics, or by individuals. It generates its own hierarchical power differences between the rich and the poor, between the capitalists and the consumers. In the spectacle, Debord says, the commodity contemplates itself in a world of its own making. That's autopoiesis. Importantly, the spectacle produces extreme consumerism and commodification. Everything is turned into a commodity that is shown. As mentioned, movement becomes sexuality. Clothing becomes a fashion show. The spectacle is the world of the commodity ruling over all lived experience. Its show business consists of all that there is to see. Is the world of the commodity. Following Marx, Debord calls this kind of extreme consumerism a type of alienation. Alienation is a classic notion going back to Hegel and Marx. And Marx thought by not collectively owning the means of production and the products that they produced, workers were, as a class, alienated. They didn't own what they made and the means by which they made it. Now, Debord thinks that by turning all our life into a show, the society of the spectacle alienates us as well from our direct life experience. He says the spectacle's function in society is the concrete manufacture of alienation. When life is a show, it's an image that is marketed and consumed. Tourism alienates people from their movement. Porn alienates them from their sexuality. The spectacle alienates human beings and human life. And then the theory of the spectacle is also about ontology, specifically about the traditional Western ontological distinction between what is real and what only appears to be real, but actually isn't. This was a distinction at the heart of the philosophy of Socrates and Plato. This distinction re-emerged in modern philosophy as the epistemological distinction between that which is true and that which only appears to be true, but may actually be false. And that was a question that, for instance, Descartes was very much interested in. For Debord, the spectacle is not fully real or true, but only appears to be real or true. Ontologically speaking, the spectacle is an appearance machine, a social structure that produces appearance rather than pure reality. It characterizes a society that is busy with the production of appearances. Here again some quotes. All it, the spectacle, says is, everything that appears is good. Whatever is good will appear. Or, the spectacle consists in a generalized shift from having to appearing. Now, instead of truth and reality, appearance reigns and is most valuable. It creates a world of illusions. Debord relates this critique of appearances to Marx's critique of religion as opium for the people. That is, as creating addictive illusions and a false consciousness. Debord says, by creating a world that is apparent, the spectacle has now taken on a similar function as religion traditionally had. He writes, the spectacle is the material reconstruction of the religious illusion. As a secular or post-religious religion or cult, it makes the false appear as real. The spectacle becomes paradoxically a real illusion. That which is really real has been replaced by a paradoxical reality that is unreal. Of course, show business is somehow a real activity. People really show and see and consume. But all you can see and consume are basically unreal staged images. So the spectacle is itself a product of real activity, but transforms reality into illusion. It is the very heart of society's real unreality. And as Debord says, it's the sector of illusion and false consciousness. The mass media, let's say the Disney Corporation or Fox News or CNN, are very real businesses whose business, similar to that of the Catholic Church in previous times, is to produce illusions, to produce spectacles, to create a world of appearances. Now, the loss of authenticity. Debord's three theoretical pillars, semiotics, political economy, and ontology, contribute to one grand narrative, to one single thread. The society of the spectacle varies one central kind of pseudo-historical complaint. Authenticity has been lost. That shows authenticity nostalgia. They are both right from the beginning of the book. All that once was directly lived has become mere representation. And the former unity of life is lost forever. Here are two examples from the book about how the authenticity of direct life is no longer accessible in the society of the spectacle. One example is free time, off work, holiday, leisure. Debord says, even in such special moments like time off, vacation, the only thing being generated is the spectacle, albeit at a higher than usual level of intensity. And what has been passed off as authentic life turns out to be merely a life more authentically spectacular. Again, think of tourism, of going to an event, or going to a club, or going shopping in your free time. It's all somehow taking part in various forms of show business and or self-branding. It's not really authentic life, but life more authentically spectacular. A second example is stardom, celebrities. Debord writes, the individual who in the service of the spectacle is placed in stardom's spotlight is in fact the opposite of an individual and is clearly the enemy of the individual in himself as of the individual. Similarly to Benjamin's analysis, the individual that is most successful in branding themselves or in show business becomes a celebrity and thereby destroys their own authenticity. They become mere copies, images without reality. Think, for instance, of influencers today. Debord describes this process of an inauthentic existence in three steps. First, he says, the spectacle erases the dividing line between true and false, repressing all directly lived truth beneath the real presence of the falsehood. So the spectacular world, mass media, social media today, is a world of mere appearances. It's a world in which that which is real, images or brands, is in fact not real or false. Therefore, all directly lived truth, authenticity, is systematically repressed. This then, according to Debord, leads to the following. The individual is thus driven into a form of madness, in which, by resorting to magical devices, he entertains the illusion that he is reacting to his fate. When living in the spectacle, you may think of, for instance, video games or fantasy games. We live in a world of fantastic illusions and somehow share a common madness that is comparable to the fantasy world of medieval religion. And thirdly, Debord says the recognition and consumption of commodities are at the core of this pseudo-response to a communication to which no response is possible. When we interact in the spectacle, again you may think of video games or fantasy games, then from the perspective of the society of the spectacle, this is actually just a form of collective consumption and not of authentic dialogue. It's pseudo-communication or fake communication with no real authentic interaction. It's a speech without response, as Baudrillard will later put it. Or you can say, we're alone together in the world of the spectacle, to quote the title of Sherry Turkle's book from 2011 about social media and digital life. Fourth, a call for revolution. Debord is not just descriptive, but as a French Marxist of the 1960s, he's also revolutionary. In his preface written 1992, he writes, "This book was written with a deliberate intention of doing harm to spectacular society. Actually, Debord advocated a new kind of proletarian revolution. The following quote gives you a taste of parts of the book which are written in the not very proletarian but fashionable and somewhat spectacular jargon of the time. I quote, "The proletarian revolution is that critique of human geography whereby individuals and communities must construct places and events commensurate with the appropriation, no longer just of their labor, but of their total history. By virtue of the resulting mobile space of play, and by virtue of freely chosen variations in the rules of the game, the independence of places will be rediscovered without any new exclusive tie to the soil." I break off here because, well, that's a little bit too much of jargon for my taste. Anyways, this passage ends with an outlook to the restoration of authenticity. Debord says, "The authentic journey will be restored to us, along with authentic life, understood as a journey containing its whole meaning within itself." Although in French, Debord uses the word réalité here, which then becomes authentic in the English translation. He still clearly expresses the idea that the whole point of his proletarian revolution is to somehow restore the lost authenticity of the past. Which brings us finally to the question, what is the difference between the spectacle and prophylicity? Well, first, let me highlight a similarity, namely the semiotic pillar of Debord's theory. Like the spectacle, profiles are constructed images with the purpose of being seen by validation through a general peer in social feedback mechanisms. And similar to Debord's notion of the spectacle, the meaning and value, including economic value of profiles, emerges in social discourse in relation to other profiles, rather than as a representation of something ultimately real. So, the basic semiotic framework, in connection with Benjamin, Derrida, Barthes, Baudrillard, of spectacle and prophylicity is indeed similar. However, the ontology and history is very different. I do not share Debord's authenticity master narrative and the basic premises formulated at the beginning of the book. All that once was directly lived has become mere representation, and the former unity of life is lost forever. I don't think that life has ever been directly lived. I don't think there ever was a unity of life. Somewhat similar to Marx, who thinks that life has always been struggle, I think that at least historical existence has always been incongruent and dissonant. So, from the perspective of prophylicity, authenticity is not an ideal. It's not a lost historical state that needs to be restored. Importantly, prophylicity is an identity technology. It's not primarily a socio-economic concept. Prophylicity, like sincerity and authenticity, has its benefits, but of course it can also be hugely problematic. And therefore, yes, we also need to be critical of prophylicity. Very similar to how Debord was critical of the consumerism and madness of the spectacle. But we shouldn't idealize at the same time a past that never existed. And importantly, to be effective critics of prophylicity, or the spectacle, we need to be self-critical. I think Debord didn't really understand how spectacular he himself was. His writing style, his film, even his posture of a proletarian revolution was also staged, was also part of an intellectual show business. In short, prophylicity is not inauthentic, but post-authentic. And that's okay. We can only critique society from the inside, not from the outside. We are part of the spectacle or prophylicity.
Louis,